Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla coming back to ya with another episode of Car Rides with Schla. Today was an alright day. I guess this week it's going by slow but fast. It's going by slow but fast. Is how the week's going by. So not much else to think about or report. Hope I didn't just seatbelt the wire down. I did. Now we have to, because I actually forgot to put my seatbelt on, which is a somewhat rare occurrence for me. Alright, we're here. We made it. Anyways. Yeah, I don't, again, another day. It went by fairly quick. It hasn't been too boring or anything, but I guess I feel like a lack of a deeperness to things. I've kind of been relaxing a bit, but it's been nice. I think that's actually been like a nice change of pace, because for a while it's like, I'm doing this show, I'm really trying to push myself to be like having this serious show and everything, and then it's just like, you know, I don't I don't know. Just gets all it just ends up being all crazy. I think. I don't know. I feel like I have these aspirations or ideals for myself that they're very high, that many people don't even think of or conclude. Um, an interesting idea, and I guess something that kind of really puts me at odds with many people. It probably helps to explain, the differences that I go through when I'm processing information. Um, it like I think about things in a very objective way, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it really tends to generate like a lot of friction with people, because most people, like, I mean, they're really not thinking that objectively, especially just in their standard day-to-day life and conversation. Um, Sorry, it just looks like there's traffic, so I'm kind of like ticked off, but I don't know what to do about that. Very frustrating. But anyways, like, it's like the way, because I was thinking I was gonna, like, well, first of all, I thought of a topic that I kind of wanted to rant about, but the more I've thought about it, I'm not really gonna rant about it, because I don't know if it's like, I don't really think I'm right. You know what I mean? I think that there's just something to what I'm saying. Yeah, actually, I don't think there's traffic. I think that was just like a weird blip, fortunately. Although I don't really know what the future entails, so, you know. But yeah, so I'm thinking, like, I would go on this rant, but then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, like, maybe I could try to take like a different approach with the episode, where, like, instead of, because a lot of times there's like I have such a, like, conviction about things. I have an anger, I have a resentment towards a lot of these topics, because it's things that are confusing for me or frustrating from other people. And so when I present this topic, because it's actually not completely in the moment, it's not just completely off the cuff. I guess I'm trying to do more of an analysis of my initial strike, post strike, because I obviously thought of this thought earlier, it's not happening live, you know? So that's kind of the I guess the basis I'm going to put down. So here's my strike. Here's the hot take. The hot take and the thing I thought of is like, why should why should anybody care about video games if they're not good? Like, if you're not really all that good at a video game, especially a competitive one, why should you be caring about it or playing it? You know, and it's a harsh take, but a lot of my takes tend to be controversial or harsh, which is why I say them on here and I don't actually say them to other people. So that's kind of that's been the good outlet about this show, is like, you know, that I would never, I don't want to say it, but I would say it, but I'm not gonna say it. But I have this show as a bit more of a productive outlet, as more of like an exploratory outlet. You know, I just I didn't want to keep saying outlet, but I don't really think of a better word. An exploratory medium for me to kind of sift through these things. And obviously the premise is that for most people, doing something benign like playing a video game is, it's very likely not helpful to them at all. And of course, first we have to go through all the typical arguments like, yes, playing video games has some potential cognitive benefits. There's some kind of teamwork, blah blah. Like, it's not all bad, but we have to take this with, you know, like how we take anything. And of course, yeah, like pretty much on any issue you can pull at straws to find out, like, and you can pick low-hanging fruit, and you know, you can probably rationalize and find benefits in anything. But, you know, of course, when it comes to gaming, it's very broad. You know, these are things that don't, like, you can't just say, oh well, all video games have the same kind of like mental benefit or stimulation, because they obviously don't. I mean, there's some games that are super advanced, and I'm sure that they could have cognitive advantages. Then other games are basically just gambling, you know, and in that rate it's like, well, you know, if you're doing the calculations on the probability, maybe, you know, doing equations to try to figure out what your chances are, I mean, that's kind of dope. But for the most part, for the most part, you know, I think most games at this point are not productive uses of time. You know, they're just not. And it's, what's interesting is because this is why I'm saying it, because like, if you're not going to be a pro, there's not like really a point in playing a video game. Like, there's no like, you can definitely just be setting yourself up for a better activity. Now with physical sports, you know, the same rationale genuinely does persist. It's kind of like, you know, if you're not going to be good enough to be pro at baseball, you probably shouldn't play it, right? But the huge caveat with that is that a real sport gives you exercise. So there's actually a massive difference between, you know, physically playing baseball versus playing a video game. There is like a very significant difference. And no, you can't just say, "Oh, well, a video game's more cognitive and a real sport is more physical." Like, a physical sport is healthier. A physical sport is healthier. There's no way around that. There's not really much of an argument. It's also more beneficial. Like, it just is. I mean, then this is something that you have to come to terms with. So if you look at a society broadly speaking, I believe that the behaviors that video games, basically the side effects of the introduction of video games is the problem. It's not really the games themselves. Because of course there's nothing wrong with like playing a video game for a few hours on the weekend, but then it's like imagine somebody does play baseball for their school and that's like their main interest. And then like yeah, on the weekend they hang out with they play video games for like they have like a 5 hour session on Saturday. But then it's like it's just Saturday, you know, and then maybe Sunday, but maybe they're also busy on Sunday. You see what I'm saying? Like that's different than people who like video games become the median trigger to pull when they don't know what to do with themselves, I guess. I guess downstream of this, I mean, it's really like TikTok is kind of the same thing. I mean, obviously, like using TikTok, it's not inherently a problem. It's just a problem when it starts to substitute these other things that are just better. Like I don't know. And again, this is where it gets kind of like yes, I tend to view things very objectively because most people would just subjectively disagree. I've heard a lot of people make comments like they're not sporty, they're not really into exercise. I've heard like all kinds of these kind of comments, and it's just not really an option, you know, like there is no human who shouldn't exercise, of course, unless in some very nuanced circumstances like they have a heart condition or maybe something is wrong with their knee or so, like obviously there are certain circumstances where exercising is not good, but beyond that, there is no reason, there's no justification to say that like exercise is against your character because of this body that we've incarnated in. It is just an essential part of what life is to be optimal. Now some people can get away with it more than others due to different genetic variation and advantages, because obviously some people, they don't have to eat as healthy as others and they can get away with it. Other people are more sensitive. They notice negative or bad food when they eat it. Other people eat junk all the time and it doesn't really faze them. So that's kind of another component. And it's relevant with video games for sure. Because this is like what I was saying earlier. It's like there's plenty of people who play video games and it's obviously like a good hobby for them, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what I'm talking about and what we're talking about is this like mass scale broad adaptation of it and kind of the material strain that comes with that. I think what's funny is I notice a lot of people hate AI and feel like they're really doing the world a favor by not using AI publicly, hating on it. But like all these same people play video games. And it's like a video game is just kind of like the predecessor to AI. So when you play a video game, you're using a lot of electricity. Even if your computer that you have is fairly inexpensive and it's efficient, then you're still using, like, obviously to host a video game, they have to have servers running. And this stuff is not good for the environment. It's not like playing an online video game is not good environmentally at all. I don't really understand why nobody talks about that, or like, all these people that criticize AI are not understanding that like they're playing an online game which yes also has a server thing, it also creates pollution. I don't really understand why it's like AI has become the main villain in some ways it makes sense because it's such a severe example of it, but at the same time, AI really has this like broad and limitless productive potential that a video game does not. A video game does not have that potential. A video game is basically wasting a bunch of electricity and internet bandwidth and resources for pleasure. I mean, same even goes for like YouTube and streaming. I mean, these are very like inefficient and pollutive concepts. And so I don't really like how it's like, okay, where are we drawing the line? Like, why is streaming environmentally permissible, but then you're gonna like virtue signal about like not using AI? Like, do some of these people even really understand that? Like, I just don't really get it. So, not to mention, a lot of these people still interact with TikTok or various social medias that implement AI anyway. But of course, they're going to criticize like a productive use of artificial intelligence. Like, I just don't understand that. Like, if you're, and this has happened to me. I mean, I'm speaking from direct experience here. People, and I don't even know if they think about it. I don't know how much they care, but it's kind of like, where do you draw that line, right? You could make the argument that we should never have used cars because they are pretty terrible for the environment. We should have just stuck with horses. The world would be a much less polluted and better place that way, but there's obviously certain caveats that would have came with that. I mean, the way that society is shaped would not be the same. And of course, I think there's actually a good amount of people nowadays who would like make claims like, yeah, well, maybe we shouldn't have had cars, because I think people are so distressed and frustrated with modernity that like they're very willing to kind of embrace a lot of like anarcho-primitist philosophies, because like people are really sick of the overcomplication and just the confusion in general. I think people are like really tired of it. So it is causing people to like, yeah, well, maybe we shouldn't have made cars. Yeah, maybe we, but it's like, again, I mean, where do you draw the line? Where does the line get drawn? Because like I said, AI is it's like a super calculator. Were there people when calculators were introduced complaining about like, oh, well, this calculator, it's not going to be good because now people won't be able to use their brains and think as much? Yeah, there were probably people saying that, but like, I mean, what ended up happening? Of course, we still advanced. Of course, using calculators is helpful, and people who are still able to think straight and use a calculator are able to do math now that basically would have been unrealistic or unreasonable to do pre-calculator. So the same goes for AI. It's entirely possible for somebody to use it in a brain-rotting way, but it's also entirely possible for people to use it really productively and use it to actually reach levels of critical thinking or critical thought that a human on its own can't do. In the same sense that, there's certain math that the efficiency that a calculator adds makes it so that we can do certain types of math that we just couldn't do before. So, yeah, I mean, I just think there's like a lot of people who are getting much more afraid and much more skeptical of the future, and I think rightly so. I think using AI productively, it's difficult, and it takes a certain mind that is very quick at generating questions. And I usually think that I'm one of these people where it's like AI came out, and at first I was a skeptic for years, But when I finally started using it, it really just fit. I mean, it was really something where the way my brain operates, it will do so well in an AI future, you know? Like, where, because I come up with so many ideas, I come up with so many thoughts and ideas, but I don't have the physical mojo to actually get them done. But if an AI could, I really think, my life would be like fundamentally changed. Would be fundamentally different, fundamentally for the better would my life be different. So I think it's all like super important to keep these things in mind. It's just like, yeah, serious. It's all serious. But that's like my point is it's like I don't really understand how people are completely fine with video games despite they're in it. Like, why don't we make the argument that we should all quit playing video games and just read books for fun? It's incredibly more environmentally friendly, or just use because I guess it's possible an e-reader could be more environmentally friendly, although it depends on like, if you're rereading text or things like that. But I haven't researched. I'm just kind of guessing. It's possible like a really cheap, eco-friendly e-reader could be more environmentally friendly than a book, but I'm not sure. And I would even go as far as to say that it could still be possible for books to be more efficient, especially if they're reread, like in the setting of a library. Um, like a library, it's such an efficient like concept. It really is. So yeah, I mean, it's all like it's interesting stuff to think about, right? But of course, like nobody says that. Everybody's fine with TikTok. Everybody's fine with YouTube. Everybody's fine with video games. But then like now AI is a huge villain. I just think it's like, are you guys serious? Are you guys not seeing like I I just don't get it. I don't get how other people are not. And I understand. I mean, AI it's maybe a more egregious it's a more egregious and obvious issue for people. But I honestly think it ultimately comes down to kind of what I was describing earlier, which is like at the end of the day, people are already into video games, people are already into TikTok, so they're going to be very resistant to vilifying these platforms and mediums. Whereas, like, AI, which is something that I don't even think that many people really use properly, it's like, it's kind of easy for people to not like it. Because I don't even, like, I don't know. And this is the thing, too, and I always, like, tell people, like, I'm all for the restriction of AI. We shouldn't be using AI for like stupid purposes. It should be very like intentional and research oriented, not for like cheating on tests or for, just taking the lazy way out with certain things that you want to do. I mean, if you can do something yourself in a reasonably efficient way, you should. But at the same time, um, like there's certain things that like the speed that an AI can do it just doesn't even make any sense for like a human to do it. There's no like there's just no sense to it at all, right? So yeah, I mean it's just it's serious. Like there's no sense. There's absolutely no sense. And but the thing is, a lot of regular people don't really have those kind of aspirations, and so they're happy with TikTok and video games, even though they are wildly wasteful and inefficient forms of entertainment. and then it's like just entertainment. It's not even being productive. So yeah, I mean, even though AI uses more computing power, at least it's productive, you know. And I don't think we would have the pollution issues we have if there was some, even just some reasonable restrictions put on AI. It would probably cut down usage by a lot. And then, you know, I'm sure there's ways to do things more efficiently when we're doing them now. You know, it's just, that's just like the market doing what the market does. And if there's not going to be any regulations, then yeah, I mean, that's how things are going to be. I don't know. But again, it all comes back to this like slippery slope and the hedonistic um, kind of like progression of things where, you know, it's just like, I don't know. Does that is it making sense? It should be making sense. What I'm trying to get at, because again, I mean, I could have just left it at, because I usually I have these like clear statements where it's like, oh, like these, you know, it's like a judgment. But I think I need, because my original judgment is just like, oh well, you know, if people are bad at a video game, why should they play it? And that, it sounds kind of like sassy. It kind of sounds like immature. It sounds a little bit like it mean, judgmental, short-sighted. But it opens up like a conversation, you know, if you let it, right? So in this case, like, I'm just trying to allow it to do so. You know what I mean? Like it's, and I think that's just, it's so much more productive of a way to approach. Like, I just feel like there's, most of the time, I mean, not all the time, obviously, but a lot of the time it's like I'm getting sparks and I'm just like recording the sparks, you know? But I'm not, the lighter's not actually, the flame's not getting lit. So, like, I feel like this conversation is more of like, you know, you're laying down the campfire, you're putting the wood down, and, you know, you're really like kind of getting somewhere rather than just making claims like, oh, well, people shouldn't play video games. Like, no, I mean, there's a whole, and really it kind of shows just how little, like, it's basically impossible to box somebody into like minimal perspectives. No, I don't mean minimal perspectives. I mean like minimal words to describe their perspective. Like, you just can't do that. You can't just say like AI is good or AI is bad. It's just like not, that's just, those kind of statements are ridiculous. And I think that's kind of the problem from the start, is people's articulation. And then in addition to their articulation, um, you know, their ability to listen, and how listening is very difficult for a lot of people. A lot of these kind of topics, they definitely take a lot of mental bandwidth and just like listening energy and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's all important to keep in mind. But yeah, and I guess the last thing I kind of want to touch on a little bit is, you know, there's sort of like a wisdom, some would say, a nice saying, that you're not supposed to worry about, like, don't worry about the things you can't change. And, you know, in a way, there's a lot of truth to that, obviously. You know, you can easily make the argument that if you can't change something, there's not really a reason to waste your mental effort and energy worrying about it, because how's that going to get you anywhere? You know what I mean? Like, you can worry about things, and it's not going to matter. However, it actually becomes harmful if it's applied as like advice. And I think we actually see the effect of it. It's very therapeutic on an individual basis, you know, for a person to not worry about larger issues, things that don't affect them. It actually has a selfish benefit, but at the end, but ultimately it becomes like, ultimately it prevents us from moving forward as a collective, because it's actually the collective worrying about things that we quote unquote can't change that brings about any meaningful change. There are certain things that it takes collective concern or collective anxiety to figure out. Like, you know, things are not always like easy. Or it's, yeah, you get what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of, I think a lot of the most important issues for us to tackle, we do need to worry about, but we have to worry about collectively. You know, these aren't going to get solved through one person caring about them. And I guess it kind of is like a waste of. Sorry, I just have to comment on this as like a closure. We'll just cut off that topic. I didn't really. We can just. That was kind of a rough draft. But this person in front of me, every single time they put the turn signal on, they like did it wrong. Like, I'm like so confused about that. I just can't. I've never like seen that before, because they're driving very slow. It's a pretty new car too. I believe it was like a new Honda Pilot, or probably the Honda Passport or something like that. And it was like every time they went to turn right, or they ended up turning right, it's like they first put the left turn signal on, and then they turned it off, and then they put the right turn signal on. And I don't really think I've seen that before, because I was behind them for a while, and like I said, not only were they driving like awfully slow, not really for any reason, but they were also doing that kind of stuff. But anyways, it's been Schla, and now it's time to buy Schla. So see you, Schla.